Welcome, everyone. We have a really great set of panelists today. I think you're in for a nice treat. I'm Marek, Olszewski. Just so you know a little bit about me, I'm one of the co-founders of Celo. And Celo is transitioning from EVM-compatible L1 to an L2. So it's going to be a real pleasure chatting with these other L2s. I think we're going to start off with like a very brief intro for each of you, not your project, just yourselves, and maybe name a fun fact. Just to make this a little more fun for the audience. I'll go first. I usually do not get altitude sick, and so I was surprised this morning when I woke up with a raging headache. So please bear with me today. But yeah, go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Avi Zurlo. I'm the CEO at NIL Foundation. My fun fact, I have a cousin. So a relative who is my cousin and my aunt.
Do you also happen to be from the South?
There's no blood overlap.
That's a hard one to follow up with. I'm Kenny, co-founder over at Manta. And I guess my fun fact is that my legal full name is only 4 letters long, like first and last name. And I've won an iPad because of that in the past. So, yeah.
Shortest name competition?
Yeah. Actually, no, it was like you had to like run on this treadmill while typing your name on a keyboard. And so kind of the shortest name competition, basically, yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm Dino, co-founder and CEO of Fluent Labs. I know I'm like very Ecuadorian, but I know I look like the mailman's kid. I'm not. I don't have a good fun fact.
I'm Joaquin. I'm COO at Taiko. You made it hard, guys. I slept 2 hours, so bear with me. I don't have a fun fact.
That's an easy one to follow up on. So I'm Bread. I'm not Bread, literally Bread. Head of growth at MegaETH. You guys may have seen us on the timeline or just wherever. Fun fact for me, I have broken basically every part of my body at some point in my life. Got a metal plate in this hand from softball, tore my ACL in playing football in high school, bike accident, 9 stitches in my foot, broke my nose trying to catch a ball at a corporate football event. Like, I'm accident prone, so don't get too close if you value your life.
Fun fact, I've never broken a bone. So I'm glad this guy's in between us.
Okay, so we have someone who moves fast and breaks things and someone who doesn't. Okay, this is really great. So we have, a very diverse set of L2s today. They're all very, very different. And so I thought we could start off with like a lightning round where I just ask you guys about a feature of the L2 and you'll answer if it's this or that. And so the first one is ZK or optimistic. Let's go this way.
ZK, optimistic.
Optimistic ZK.
CK.
ZK. Wait, are we saying answering for our L2 or the future of L2s?
For your L2.
Optimistic, day one. But will be ZK because ZK is the future.
Okay, Alt DA or Ethereum DA?
ETH DA. Alt DA.
ETH DA.
EVA.
Alt DA.
Like
The only DA because DA does not deserve a premium.
Modular or monolithic?
Modular.
Modular.
Model.
Monolithic.
How is that possible? You're using EigenDA.
Well,
And Ethereum.
I'm sorry. I'm thinking mindset, right? So I'm thinking the modulistic or vertical scaling integrated, right? Like that's that kind of mindset, right? So we're thinking not horizontal scaling, not playing nice with everyone. We're thinking go big, go high, monolithic mindset.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to talk about that in a bit as well. Okay, sequencer, centralized or decentralized?
Centralized.
Somewhat decentralized.
Fully decentralized.
You're gonna hate this. Decentralized.
Huh?
Yeah, because everyone. I wrote a big post on it. Just go to my Twitter today. You'll see how I break it down. Because I think people have a misconception of what decentralized is, because it's not a pure term, right? It's a relative term. More decentralized, less decentralized, right? And for us, like our value prop is removing consensus, not removing any other operators, right? Our sequencer will be operated by more than just MegaETH, therefore not as centralized as some parties.
How many
Okay.
parties get to decide on the ordering?
One.
That would be centralized.
Right, but that party can change, right? They can rotate.
Okay,
But-
let's debate this later because I do like a good debate. But let's quickly finish these questions. Vertical scaling, horizontal scaling.
Horizontal scaling.
Oh, you mean what we are, right? Vertical scaling.
Vertical scaling.
Horizontal.
Vertical.
EVM, non-EVM.
EVM.
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both.
EVM.
EVM.
Okay, app chain or generic? This is the last one.
Generic.
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 Today generic, in the future app chain.
Generic.
Amazing. Okay, at least one where you all agreed. Okay, so I think now folks hopefully have a good understanding of all the differences. So maybe now's a good time just to introduce your projects and you can reference all of these differences that you have relative to the others.
Sure, I'll start. So at Nil Foundation, we've built a sharded rollup. Now, what does that mean? We've taken essentially the original Ethereum vision of sharding and implemented that as an L2. Now, our core to our thesis is that horizontal scale is not just a necessity for proliferation of customized app chains. It's necessary strictly for compute. And we know this because software adoption always outpaces hardware improvements. And so we've taken a lot of the lessons from Web 2. We've moved into this distributed compute paradigm built around the EVM, and we're live in testnet.
Yeah, so Manta, we take a very modular approach to how we're building on the infrastructure layer. And we do this because we believe that the future of how infrastructure should be built should not be purely within one singular core team. And so we use technologies like AltDA, which we just kind of mentioned, and we're also looking at alternative methods for faster finality because we are an optimistic rollup. And so we're using Symbiotic Babylon as well. And yeah, it allows us to be much more agile. It allows us to be flexible in being able to adapt new technologies to whatever the changing user demands would be in the market.
Fluent, the first blended execution network, and L2 chain that supports EVM, SVM, and WASM apps all in the same place. And we're in DevNet. What else? We think that developers should just be able to use their favorite tools, the best tools for the job, what have you. It could be because you're more familiar with a given set of tools. It could be because there's already pre-written stuff that's written from Web 2. You should be able to bring it in. Or if you're like a SVM fanatic, you should be able to code that way if you want to.
So Taiko is the first base rollup on Ethereum. So we use Ethereum almost for everything. Sequencing, settlement, DA. We don't use it for execution yet. We're not a native rollup. But yeah, I guess we are probably the most aligned solution with Ethereum here in the panel.
I would agree with that. Yeah, MegaETH, real-time blockchain. What that means in technical terms is it's just we're vertically scaling the L2 stack, right? We have one giant sequencer. Mentioned earlier, there's a little bit of a rotation there, so it's not always going to be our sequencer, but it will be a big sequencer. We have developed something or furthering something that's actually kind of already out there in node specialization, because you have one big machine, creates a lot of data, shoots a lot of stuff out in the internet, right? You need things to be able to keep up with that, and how do you keep up with that without forcing hardware requirements on people is we do this thing, again, called node specialization, where we take what was traditionally a single node to keep up with our big machine, and we split it into multiple roles. A prover network, which generates proofs against the various blocks that we create, sends that over to replica nodes, which only take in the state diffs from the sequencer, much less compute that's actually needed there. And through this combination of machines, which again is just everything has node specialization, but we're just kind of taking it to the extreme to enable a very performant ecosystem on top of Ethereum that doesn't aim to fragment ourselves with horizontal scaling and working well with other L2s, although we will, right? Bridges and stuff will be there, but we just want to create a very responsive, very large, single-state environment within the Ethereum ecosystem.
Cool. Okay, so the title of this panel is around achieving high performance and then also doing so in a user-centric way. So let's start with performance. I think that was a good segue. When we were doing the rapid fire questions, some of you said you're scaling vertically, some of you said you're scaling horizontally. So I think that's probably a good starting point. Maybe, can each of you weigh in just on why you're choosing to go either one way or the other? And honestly, let's make this a debate. Let's get to the bottom of what's the better design. So if you want to interrupt yourselves, if you want to yell at yourselves, if you guys want to yell or throw tomatoes, whatever, let's make this fun. But let's actually get to the bottom of whether vertical or horizontal scaling is the way to go for L2s. And I think let's start with MegaETH, Nil, and Fluent. Let's take it away.
So I think it's a false premise to say one is better. First of all, I think it's always what are you trying to build and what solution is best for what you were trying to build, right? If you're trying to launch an application, right? Something on this panel is probably going to serve that application better than something else on this panel. And again, we have a varying degree of how we're implementing that stuff. So it really is always just what are you implementing? What technological stack fits my application the best to serve my users the best? So obviously, we have an opinion that vertically scaling L2s, right, very responsive applications are the way that the market is showing us that they like, right? We had this pendulum swing where everything started monolithic. We started swinging really heavy to this modular horizontal scaling thing. Now we have fragmentation all over the place, and everyone's swinging back to the Solanas of the world because, you know what? Maybe we don't all want to capture 100% of our value to create our own the entire technological stack, right? So you're seeing people give up a little bit of that value to then go to these singular, composable, simple environments. And it's honestly just a reaction to the market. This has been in the works for a while, but there wasn't a response to Solana. But I think Solana, Hyperliquid, these very large, very performant, very composable environments, the market is showing to want that, and they're the ones that ultimately dictate this stuff, right?
Avi?
Yeah, I think just quickly, I feel like probably most people have heard of horizontal and vertical scaling, but just the definition, right? Vertical scale, you scale a system by increasing hardware utilization or the hardware requirements, right? And so you kind of take the constraint that you have a server and you want to get more out of it, or you want to increase the capacity that server actually offers the system. Horizontal scale is you actually want to make use of as many servers as possible, and you distribute workloads across many servers at once. And I think you made a comment here of horizontal scale, sort of implies some sort of fragmentation, which isn't necessarily true, right? And it depends on how it's implemented. It's true that the roll-up-centric roadmap was a means of horizontally scaling Ethereum. Now, the nuance is what they did was created a bunch of different subsystems, and you didn't actually scale the system that is Ethereum. And hence, we live in this world of fragmentation. That being said, you can build a horizontally scalable system that doesn't have fragmentation, right? That still has composability, and that can still be treated as one single unified execution environment. And that's what we've done at Nil. We've built a sharded rollup, which is essentially running over many, many servers all at once. But all of those servers and state machines have access to one another in perpetuity, and they share a uniform developer experience and execution environment. And I think that's sometimes lost in the L2 fragmentation talk, right? But, horizontal scale does not imply fragmentation. It implies fragmentation when it's poorly implemented.
So on that, so this is just from my own understanding of how this stuff is working out, right? Sharding is internal to a system in my how I mental model the stuff, versus the roll-up-centric roadmap is external, right? It's a bunch of distinct environments. So the lag time between these two things talking amongst each other is usually pretty long, right? Long enough that it's distinct, separate environments. Whereas in a sharded environment, there's still lag time, right? Typically, to make these things settle, usually half a second, a second.
Yeah, I mean right, when you have, there's this natural thing about human nature. If you let somebody go off on a whim and do something, you can't expect others to follow, right? So the roll-up-centric roadmap really optimized for programmability, customization, right? You could run whatever you wanted, right, and you'd be part of this roll-up ecosystem. The issue is it's very, very difficult to coordinate amongst all of these heterogeneous systems. Standardization is hard, right? Buying into the same protocol. So we take a very opinionated approach that we standardize everything, right? It's one big, monolithic execution environment that's running over many, many machines at once. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's
you
just
want to say
like,
something?
and yeah, and I'm thinking of the XKDC. I think is the comic, right? Like if you leave humans to their own, it's like, oh, there's 14 standards. These all suck. We should create a standard to unify the standards. Oh, we have 15 standards, which I think is what we're seeing now with interoperability, right? Arbitrum just dropped theirs. We have Ag Layer. We have Optimism that's going to have their cluster. So like we have a lot of these interoperability solutions that will solve the other interoperability solutions to therefore unify the ecosystem. And I think there's a lot of fatigue that comes with that.
Dino, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, so I think kind of similar to what you were saying, like it really depends. It really depends on like the state of, I think, the industry. I think it depends on the state of a given application. Like the stuff is always kind of like a pendulum swinging back and forth. Like the classic like unbundling and bundling thing where like you might have, a given application that, they starts off and it's like good enough to just deploy on like a shared state environment. It's easy. They get help with like distribution, et cetera. And then eventually they want to like get into a customize more and more things, and then they might want to deploy somewhere else. And like I think you're just gonna start, like I think we're always gonna see that. And actually, sorry, was the question more about like vertical or horizontal scalability, or
Exactly.
Okay. I think for the near term, the shared state kind of vertical scalability will end up being like good enough. Honestly, like I definitely agree with like a lot of chains in the medium to longer term, like as more of these applications I was starting to talk about when I thought the question was different, start to grow and mature, right? Like I do think you're going to see a lot of that, all this like some of these, the standards problems like will be solved one way or another. But in the near term, I think like there's plenty of performance for a lot of like interesting like consumer applications. There's just going to be like a very like easy, operationally efficient go-to-market for a lot of teams to just like throw a couple contracts on a chain that's like performant enough.
Kenny, Joaquin, anything to add?
Yeah, sure. I think it's horizontal scaling. I think that's the future state. It's inevitable. I'll give you two examples. The first one is inscriptions. I don't know, you guys familiar with inscriptions? Yeah, okay, so they started off on Bitcoin, right? And then they decided to make their way through all the L2s. And then you started seeing this wave of all these L2s halting block production time because the throughput just couldn't be sustained by one single L2.
Not all of them.
Exactly, Manta was an exception, actually. So not saying Manta's better than all those other ones, but proof's in the pudding, or the bread pudding. Second example is, I forgot who tweeted this, but it was very recent. They were like, and I think they said it kind of like a joke, but they were like, Solana is handling all these users right now just fine. So what's the point of horizontal scaling? But if you look at it from a pure numbers perspective, Pump Fun on its peak of user activity had about like 150,000 daily active users, right? Like, guess how many daily active users Duolingo has? 15 million, I think. Yeah. But some like crazy magnitude higher, right? And so like I think like I think some of the points being made here right now makes a lot of sense, right? It's like the current state, do you need horizontal scaling? I don't think so, right? Unless you want to, help benefit more airdrop farming bots, right? But like apart from that, I don't think there's enough users in this space right now to justify horizontal scaling. But I do think in a future state, then if you're trying to look for that quote unquote killer app, you have to have the foundation to sustain a killer app that can sustain 15 million DAUs, which I don't think we're at right now.
So we're like pushing back on that a little bit. Not even pushing back, but just like addressing what I think the question is ultimately trying to answer is most people in the room like want to know where the fuck does the value accrue in like these ecosystems, right? Like if you have 1,000 goddamn chains and 25 bridges and 175 like interoperability protocols, they all have tokens. Like which one of those things goes up the most, right? A lot of people are trying to answer that question when they ask the question of like, which of these things are going to exist? And I think there is a difference between the answer to that question and then like the literal like compute requirement to have both of these things like handle the workload of the world, right? I don't think anyone is delusional enough to say that like one machine will handle the entire world's workload and be fine, right? I think even the people that advocate for horizontal scaling, or vertical scaling, I should say, myself included, like, yeah, one machine's not going to do it. But if you have 100% of the global block space demand eaten up, 25% of that goes to one instance, right? That can handle a quarter, 15%, right? 10%, whatever. And there's a single token associated to that. The value accrual picture in that world is much, much clearer than the remaining 85% distributed across 175 tokens, right? And that is what's confusing to a lot of people. And I think that is ultimately what people are trying to get to, like when they ask this question of like, where's the future? They're going to which token's going to go up the most? And it's probably the thing that eats up the most singular chunk of the global block space demand, in my opinion. And we see that like block space is not fungible, right? Like right now base is 101% of their block space is in demand, right? People are paying over the gas limit to get into to base block space, even though Zora has perfectly usable block space. Why wouldn't you just go transact over there? It's cheaper. And it's because you want to be close in proximity to atomically, you want to be able to compose with the things that exist only in base, right? And like, people are naturally going to gravitate to that stuff over time, and I think that is ultimately just where I see the industry going. That one, it's not fungible, and two, people want to know about where value accrues, and it accrues to these large environments.
I think that's true up to the point where, sorry, you said make it, a debate, right? I think it's true up until the point where, Nil Foundation made the point where it's like, horizontal scalability doesn't necessarily necessitate fragmentation. And so right now, absolutely, right? Like the reason why people don't, create their wallets on Manta and then use applications on Base is because it's virtually impossible, right? But I do think that, if you start working towards like more of that abstraction from fragmentation, then horizontal scalability becomes a very viable option.
Yeah, I was going to make exactly the same point. Turns out, so however we decide to scale horizontal or vertical, I think one lesson learned in the last years is let's not fragment more the space, because for many reasons it's a big issue. Turns out on the horizontal scaling side, there's a solution to scale almost to the infinite without fragmenting anymore, which is called, I think Declan said it before in his talk, it's called synchronous composability. It happens horizontally scaling. There's two requisites for that to happen. One of them is having a shared sequencer, which is already doable today. Ethereum is one option, which is the one that Taiko is using, but there's other more centralized shared sequencers that anyone can use. The other thing that's needed to achieve this synchronous composability is the instant CK proofs, which is not doable today as far as I know, but I think snarks are improving very fast. If you have both, you essentially, both elements in the equation, you essentially have a chain that can scale horizontally and can read the state of the other chains in real time, and essentially have the experience of using just one chain while having like 1,000 different execution environments. And that will be doable, and it's not far from today.
That's a really good definition of synchronous composability. That's one of the best I've heard. Amazing. So I think, okay, we got into it. I love it. Keep interrupting each other. Let's transition to the other topic at hand, which is this user-centric kind of element that was added to the title. Curious what you guys are doing for each of your L2s to really focus on usability, to make the lives of your users easier. And let's flip the order this time. So Joaquin, why don't you kick it off?
Sure. That's hard to start on this one, because if anyone has used Taiko today, it's a little bit painful. We are paying the price of being a base rollup when the technology, I don't want to say it wasn't ready, but it was very hard, let's put it this way. Because we're a base rollup, we leverage the block time of Ethereum. Our transactions take a lot of time to confirm, if you have tried it. Like the shortest is 12 seconds, but it takes much more in practice, like 30 seconds or something like that. So this is going to be fixed very soon. We have been collaborating with the Ethereum Foundation very closely on what I call base pre-confirmations. Pre-confirmations is a concept that exists today. Like any optimistic rollup, if you try it, transactions get confirmed in milliseconds or a few seconds. Turns out they are not final. There is an optimistic rollup. There's a challenge period, sometimes takes 7 days. But for the user, they get pre-confirmed in milliseconds, which is what matters. But the problem with those, but to me it's a problem. The problem with those confirmations that are reputation-based, which means you need to trust the centralized sequencer to fulfill the promise. What we are building essentially to fix this and care about the user, which is the question that you asked, is make it in a way that is trustless, is essentially secured by economics, by a risk-taking mechanisms where, well, I don't want to deep dive too much on that, but you can get us last if you don't fulfill the promise of including a pre-confirmed transactions in a future block, and that will essentially fix that you will get the user experience of Solana in a rollup, while not introducing extra security assumptions and keeping it decentralized, which is beautiful, if you ask me.
Kenny?
I think usability and users, it goes beyond technology, and mainly the big pain point, in my opinion, is all the incentives right now in this space are so fucked up. Like,
Go on.
right? Like, I think we've already attracted the critical mass of users that want to adopt crypto. Why? Because the critical mass of users that we've attracted to date are gamblers, are speculators, are people who, I'm just addressing the elephant in the room here, right? And we continue to incentivize for the benefits of those individuals, those bots, those farms, and it doesn't really get us anywhere, right? At the end of the day, I think like DeFi still is truly the only use case in crypto right now, and everything is centered around DeFi with a little bit of makeup on to say, oh no, we're a social platform, right? Like we're a social network, right? What happened to FriendTech? They were a cool social network until they launched their token, right? What happened to BitClout? They were also a cool social network until, I guess, their token. And like the list goes on, right? There's this graveyard of applications that masquerade as some alternative value proposition that ultimately boils down to how much can I airdrop farm from this? What's the speculation around that? And so going back to sort of usability, right? Like the question in my mind is, how do you attract the rest of the population? The people who go on Twitter not for the sake of tweeting so they can earn airdrops, but for the sake of tweeting because they like interacting with each other, right? The core value proposition of Twitter is not to give you an airdrop, right? And so like I don't think you can put an amount of money behind it and attract this amount of users. When you put a certain amount of money behind it, you only attract people who want money. And so for us, right, like over at Manta, that's on a high level exactly the core theme that we're dealing with here. And one of the things that is actually starting to work for us is finding developers who want to transition into Web3, but have not yet been tainted by all the crazy stuff that happens in this space, because a lot of the hacker houses that we're running around the world now specifically tailor to that transition period developer, and we're starting to see a lot of tangible core value propositions come out from those use cases that aren't about necessarily, airdrops and all that other stuff and tokenization, but more so about how do you solve this and how do you bring a real value proposition on chain, and how do you connect that real value proposition in a Web3 side to the Web2 user. So yeah, that's what we're doing at Manta.
Dino?
Were you gonna jump in?
Yeah, I was gonna kind of push back on the speculative thing. Not even push back on it, but I think like it's something that warrants like a glass half full perspective of it, right? Like what are blockchains good for, right? It's permissionless capital formation, right? Being able to actually like communicate value. And yes, a lot of these things have been tainted because speculators come in and they drive prices crazy and your emotions get involved and stuff. But I think like there is or can be good intent in some of these people creating things that ultimately will be speculated on because there is a dollar figure attached to it, because it is capital markets, right? And you can actually do this stuff permissionlessly, like the FriendTechs of the world. And I think the ultimate goal of this stuff is to make that a symbiotic relationship and use that for good, right? Like again, using FriendTech, I was deep in those trenches, so like my heart's torn here. But like, you know, like the structure could have been, right, in a good world, right, is like, yes, there's a little bit of like FOMO and stuff there, but it's ultimately trying to open up another way to communicate value on like in a social capacity, and then letting speculators sit on the back end and fund that, right? Like let people do the degen betting, whatever stuff, and like have that stuff, but harness it into having value communicated in a wholesome way. And like, yes, it wasn't a perfect product, whatever, but there's like a lot of things that are doing things like that. So yeah, like that's just to say that like I think it's always going to be present, and if we sit there and say like this stuff is just like we only have the bad people now, good people will come eventually, I think that bad thing will always be present, and we have to look at that and say like, look, like we can harness this in a good way by like enabled by the technology itself. And then
I agree. I think we're on the same page here. I think like my only qualm is, let's just call it DeFi, right? Like, let's not try to pretend it's something else. DeFi works, yeah, totally.
fair.
What do you call like Polymarket DeFi?
Yes.
Okay. No. I'm not saying I disagree. It's just, it's interesting because like I agree with you. There's like some of these products can almost on the back end be like, you know, fully gambling centric, very financial in nature, but then like there could be some kind of second order effects that end up enhancing other apps or experiences. Like I think like on the back end, Polymarket's obviously like a betting market, but then it also provides like better real time, you know, truth in a way.
Yeah,
like
truth
so
seeking, right?
You know, so it's like I wouldn't call that a social app. Like yeah, you're right, it's DeFi, but like it is doing more.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page because, like, at the end of the day, I believe the only value proposition that's proven is some type of value proposition that has finance fundamentally at the core of it. And how that manifests can be in Polymarket, it can be in NFTs, it can be in all sorts of things that also have side effects that trickle down beyond just the DeFi aspect.
We literally never be able to get rid of that stuff, right? I think back to the points meta, right? The points meta was like, oh, we're taking the points off chain, right? So we're not doing a token, we're doing points to make sure we can remove the financialization of it. You know what we did? We fucking tokenized that shit. We created the whales market so people could speculate, so that people can actually like try to pre-price these markets. So like the core features of the technology makes it such that, and because it's permissionless, anyone can just do that shit, right? Like that will never go away in any capacity for anything. Yeah. Anyways, we're kind of deviating, I think, from.
Yeah,
from
maybe it's worth going back a little bit to usability. I'm guessing some of you guys are doing something around usability and want to share it. So now's your opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. I'll extend on it. So we're EVM equivalent, right? So we have all the like aiming to be equivalent. We're willing to break for some compatibility stuff and not compatibility, but some UX features. The biggest one being 7702, right? Like that's the thing everyone wants. Remove approvals from the EVM flow. So there's the one side, which is just like the literal like how the chain behaves, because that, you know, it's coming in Pectra. And then there's the actual like how the chain behaves, like the responsiveness of it, like the actual features we're trying to enable with the unbound compute and the responsiveness, the real-timeness of the blocks. That enables the user experience that is a little more in line with what people are used to in Web 2 world, right? You push a button, you instantly have your thing settled on chain, because again, we're settling in that instantaneous time frame of a couple hundred milliseconds, and then yeah, creating those experiences for people.
In our case, for developers, we are type 1, which means we're Ethereum equivalent. You migrate your application from Ethereum, you need to change the code. No need to re-out. It works out of the box. For users, I would say base pre-confirmations is one thing, but long term, I guess we are really trying to fix the fragmentation issue in a, you know, again, without introducing extra security assumptions. By choosing Ethereum as a sequencer, search sequencer, and then there's these hardware accelerators on the snark side. So for users, I guess the best news you can get out of this is Ethereum. It's in the roadmap of Ethereum projects like Taiko to make Ethereum feel like one chain again and access the liquidity of other rollups real time and don't having to suffer the breach experience.
I'll wrap up here. I'm going to try and draw like a through line between the last two subjects that we talked about and this, because as the back and forth around finance is going on DeFi, I kept like thinking of like Wu-Tang's Cream, cash rules everything around me, DeFi rules everything around me. And that is like, that is the product market fit for blockchains. Now, the promise and potential that they hold is you can build these systems at global scale, right, across every single market in the world. And now to come back to this horizontal versus vertical scaling topic, Kenny mentioned Duolingo here, 15 million users, right? What is that in terms of like a global population, right? That is like less than 0.5%. I mean, it's nothing.
Good math. Wow.
And so if you think that these systems are meant to be globally scaled or distributed, then you cannot fit it all on a single server, right? And this is why what we've done on the usability end is make a distributed programming environment around the EVM really easy to use for developers. The idea is that we want people to build protocols, for the fullest, potential of DeFi, which we think really only works at global scale. This is where things like comparing a DEX to a SEX really become very apparent why a DEX is going to win long term. A SEX has incredible overhead in terms of compliance. Most of their cost structure is compliance. A DEX, it's zero. Okay, if you're able to scale that across global markets, it is going to win every single time. But it needs to hit that sort of critical mass. And this becomes actually an I/O problem. You're I/O bound if you're trying to do everything over one RAM. And this is why we try to offer developers essentially as a linearly scalable access to memory, being able to offer tens of millions, 100 millions, and eventually billions of users at once.
I love it. How are we doing on time?
I could go all day.
I would say
5 more minutes. Awesome. Cool. Well, I think some of you started talking a little bit about the usability of all of Ethereum. All of us are L2s that are under Ethereum. And I think that might be an interesting thing to explore is what do you guys think Ethereum should be doing to improve usability across all of you guys? And then also just what are you guys doing to help that? I think Vitalik famously said that Ethereum eventually should feel like you're using one system, right? So regardless of which of these chains ultimately you're executing your transactions on, the user doesn't need to know. They have one Ethereum wallet, everything is seamless. And I'm kind of curious what you guys think of that vision. Does that go counter to what you're building, or are you working towards that vision as well? Let's flip the order this time.
Yeah, I think Ethereum should become far more opinionated about the L2 roadmap. I think they should essentially try to eat into the existing market share of L2s. I think they should try and make our business obsolete and launch a cluster of rollups with a standard messaging format, a protocol specification, and an updated token standard that they're all going to abide by, and force every other rollup to buy into that standard. And I think that's the only way that you solve this interop problem and fragmentation problem, is Ethereum itself, makes everybody else bend the knee. Are they going to do it?
I love it.
Absolutely not.
That's very spicy, but I happen to agree, honestly. Maybe others don't, but I honestly, and that ties into the question. We're so hyper-focused right now on vertical scaling. We're going to parallelize this blended environment, and I think we have some pretty cool, a pretty cool approach to doing that. That's it's kind of like how Mona does it, but a little bit different. That we'll share a lot more on over the next couple months. But anyway, point is we're very focused on making our system really scalable. Obviously, we have kind of the inherent, I think, developer benefits of being able to use different types of languages, basically different program and different types of, bring code from different existing VMs, all of that. So we're just placing a bet that ends up being such a compelling place for developers that, interesting apps kind of emerge, and whatever standards end up developing. So we're basically not too focused right now on pioneering some of those standards for across different chains, but however they end up forming, we're all for that.
I love I'm the same. I think the Ethereum world has like, first of all, you're drawing a circle around what Ethereum is. Like some people have drawn that line and excluded us, right? Because we don't use Ethereum as DA. So like straight up, like you're not Ethereum, right? I argue with Fuel about that, lovingly. So like first, like to be able to create this unified experience, you have to have a agreement on like what is this thing that we could unify around, right? And actually enable like a unified experience. So like that question needs to be answered, and it's frankly not answered amongst anyone within Ethereum today. And then the second thing
I
is,
think Vitalik does have a blog post that says these are the things that are required to align with Ethereum.
yeah,
Alt DA was not, or using Ethereum for DA was not required.
yeah, it was like a pointed weight system. Actually, I suggested people do like a L2 beat of like alignment, right? So you give them all the points that are weighted for each of the things that they have, and then you can see who scores the highest. Yeah. But anyways, like the yeah. The second thing was like for Ethereum to actually like win. I honestly believe similar to what he was talking about. We're like compete with us, make L2s obsolete. But I'd say even just do it within their own domain. I think there's the humans have shown to, or the value will accrue the most whenever you make your own thing that you can control as valuable as you can. Like people will be attracted to that, and then they will tack on their own use case, their own value, their own. They will gravitate to that environment. So for me, that is, Ethereum needs to come out with standard specs of bandwidth, hardware, every single one of these things. That they need to have it itemized, and then they need to scale to those levels to make sure they're not jeopardize decentralization, liveness, censorship resistance, all these important properties that they value. So make sure that you can uphold those two things and then scale maximally to those two things as fast as you can, right? Like comfortably. And in doing so, they will make the L2 lives better. Interoperability gets better because you get single slot finality, right? You can improve the L1 by proxy improve the L2s, right? And then maybe even start enshrining your own L2s on top of that once you've reached capacity, right? If you can actually execute hitting the L1 scale enough, and then push things out. You need to harvest users though. The L1 has to have users.
Yeah, on top of what Brett said, I think scale, the layer one, especially scale DA, because I think it will be the biggest bottleneck in the future. And turns out, if you use an alt DA, that's why I mentioned I'm more on the Ethereum DA. If you use an alt DA, you're breaking this synchronous composability, because Celestia, it has its own sequencer, so Ethereum doesn't have this monopoly to achieve this highest level of interoperability. And I think DA is going to be the biggest bottleneck for scaling on layer 2s in the future.
Already is.
Kenny?
The thing I hate about Ethereum is that it thinks like a colo data center. Like, do you guys, this is probably going to outdate most of you guys, but there was a time of data centers called co-location centers. Do you guys know about that? All right, the old guy's shaking his head. Me too. The thing is, back then, before modern technology, what people would do is they would create these gigantic buildings, right? And these gigantic buildings have all sorts of servers in them. And, like IBM would put their servers in, and Google will put its servers in, and Walmart will put its servers in, and all this other stuff. And it's like a little city with computers everywhere that are all kind of doing the same thing and serving their own sort of ecosystem, but they don't talk to each other. And even if they do, it's like very limited communication, right? And so I think that's Ethereum's current state. It thinks very much like a co-location data center, which is why we have all these fragmented L2s with our own brands, and we have our own liquidity, we have our own weird parallel universe of the same apps, and all this other stuff. What I think Ethereum needs to do is think like a cloud computing center, right? And this also goes back to horizontal scalability, because I think ultimately Ethereum will play the role of AWS. And what that means is that you are now not necessarily concerned about whether you're on Walmart servers or Google servers or Kroger servers, but rather that you have whatever server as a commodity to be able to perform at whatever levels you need to perform, and you load balance across those, which translates in Web3 terms into don't fragment the liquidity, and continue to scale. And I think Ethereum's focus, I know they have a 30-year roadmap now, but if I could change one thing about that, I would say that it should focus more on unifying scalability rather than continuing to build out fragmented worlds for which are more advantageous for vertical scalability.
So I think we're getting close to time, but I do want to end with 30 seconds from each of you. I think the audience here has a lot to learn from folks up here. And so I want to have them walk away with like an interesting fact that they learned. So I'm kind of curious, what are you guys most excited about over, say, the next 6 to 12 months that is not related to your current project? What are you seeing either in Ethereum or in all of crypto, like a trend, a meta that is really eye-opening that maybe folks in the audience haven't seen yet and you guys can enlighten them? 30 seconds.
I was like, okay, so he's on the panel. Base rollups. I think that that's when you'll see me on Twitter say I think the future is based in big. I think this whole middle ground of where the current constructions of L2s are, where they're not very scalable because they're so restricted by Ethereum, and then they're not really giving a lot of fees back to Ethereum, so you're not getting this ultrasound money narrative, whatever. It's kind of like evaporating both ends of the spectrum. Like you can't compete with Solana because you're restricted by Ethereum, and you're not paying money to Ethereum. You're eating 95% of the actual fees. So you're losing some of the ultrasound stuff. So I think like one's our side, the big side, but also like the based side, like this trying to like pull out Ethereum's rich history and make it interoperable amongst a cluster of nodes, environments, sequencers, whatever. So I'll throw shine at the other guys on the platform. I hope that based can be interoperable, seamless, and composable to the degree that I want it to be and feel like Ethereum. I think that'll be one end of the spectrum. That's really exciting. So bullish on Taiko, guys.
Thanks, bro. No, I'm not going to say base rollups, of course. I would say there's a big reputational crisis on Ethereum. So guys, be bullish on Ethereum. You're in the right place. Don't go to Solana Breakpoint. Keep sticking around these Ethereum conferences. All these problems that Ethereum has today, fortunately, they seem to have a solution, and yeah, be bullish on Ethereum.
This is more about the app layer. So I think there's a lot of really awesome primitives that are just hiding in plain sight that just need better kind of like startup execution and like product people involved. And like I think that we're actually at a point where you can pretty easily like onboard people who are like crypto adjacent, who like really know how to think about like product. Maybe they're like cloud SaaS people or whatever, and take some of these primitives and honestly like just enhance application experiences with them. I mean, maybe there's a million different, there's a huge design space for things like, like prediction markets that end up looking like kind of what we were starting to talk about before, nothing like prediction markets. They don't look like finance, but there's like a lot of cool primitives that just need better like product people, in my opinion. But I think that's bullish. Like we can actually, we've had decent amount of success over the past few months for Fluent. Like we're taking very like concentrated bets on people and just teaching them about like what these primitives can actually do. And these people understand software, they understand products, they understand like problems to solve in the real world. And like, I think it can work.
Yeah, I think DeFi primitives are probably one of the. What's funny?
That's everything, bro.
No,
DeFi is everything. You just said everything's bullish.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, DeFi. I think at the end of the day, like there's so much opportunity to transform traditional finance and improve upon it. And I think there's been a lot of examples of this in crypto that have worked out really well. Right, whether it's lending protocols, whether it's decentralized exchanges, whether it's hyperliquid, right? Like these have all been very successful case studies. I think the next big category of DeFi case studies is going to be in RWAs, because specifically with real-world assets, right? You meet another need in the finance industry where the suppliers, right, the people with the assets, want access to global liquidity, and the people who want assets that they normally can't access, right? Like if you're a if you're not a part of the United States, you can't access the US stock market, right? Very simple example. So I do think like RWAs is something that is probably next on the horizon for DeFi.
Okay, I have 4, and I'm not gonna really explain them. So if you wanna talk about them, we can talk. Number 1, truly nation state censorship resistant private shared state. Number 2, Bitcoin rollups. Number 3, increase in integrity of builders and a washout of the grifts. And number 4, I'm blanking on. Fuck.
I can make one
Well,
up.
find me, and I'll say, yeah.
NFTs.
I'll make one up. ZK passports. I'm really excited about the fact that you can prove the authenticity of your passport. Passports now have these NFC chips in them with signed data, and you can actually prove on-chain that this passport was in fact issued by an issuing country. And even better than that, you can prove on-chain, this is without a counterparty, you're just proving with a smart contract, you can prove arbitrary facts about yourself based on what's in your passport. So you can prove, for example, that you're over a certain age, you can prove that you're not on an OFAC list, you can prove that you're from a country, not from other countries. You can even prove that your name is Bob if you want to create a coin that rewards people who are named Bob. So Solana doesn't have this. This is, a few projects are doing this in Ethereum. One just went live this week. Yeah, I'm super bullish on that.
Y Nation? Is that right? Y Nation?
Self.xyz.
I remember what I was going to say, too. More opinionated Ethereum organizations.
And actually, I thought about when you guys were going. It was I'm stealing this actually from Tay on Eclipse. He said the other day. It's natural language AI agents that actually have conditionals applied to them. So like if I could just natural language say, hey, follow this coin, this specific contract, and whenever it hits 500 million market cap, sell 20% of my bag. Boom. And I have that actually execute on chain without me having to stay up till 3 a.m. at night, hoping that the tweet goes out, like that level of stuff. I think that'll be fun.
I love it. Okay, we're at time. Thank you so much. Let's please give a round of applause to the amazing panelists.